Hello and a warm welcome back to the Opposites Abroad podcast, a podcast covering all things travel. Charlie Bosco here, joined as ever by Traveller Tattoo, TT, down in Denver, fresh back from a weekend in Cancun. Not that I'm jealous, as it's 5 degrees here.
Yes, I landed 3 hours ago.
Impressive dedication to podcasting.
I am nothing but dedicated, and you were the person who really taught me about consistency. So I try to follow through on those lessons that you gave me.
Thank you. I'm glad I've taught you something.
Yes.
Well, today we're hopefully providing some value of our own. Were we talking about value? That pun maybe didn't work, but we're talking about all things value. We're talking about how to manage your travel budget, how to get the most out of your budget, get the right trip for you. And it's a really tricky topic. And I remember someone said to me a long time ago, and it's always stuck with me, that everything has a price, and it's the same for everyone, but the value of everything is different for everyone. So, for example, a Ferrari has no value to me because I would feel like an idiot driving it.
I'd feel awesome.
Yeah, you can't go fast in it. I couldn't fit all my climbing gear in it and my skis. It literally has no value to me. But the price tag is the same for me as someone that actually wants to buy one. So you have to figure out what the value of something is rather than the price tag. And I guess that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Yes, and be prepared. I might have a few controversial statements because I have some kind of strong opinions on a couple things, but I think between the two of us we'll have some really good advice.
All right, I'm trying to figure out where your controversial opinions might come in. I'm looking forward to hearing them. Just drop them in like a sledgehammer.
I normally do, and some of them get edited, and some you edit out, and some stay.
Oh no,
in, so.
I'll keep them in, but let's see. They might be as welcome as a fart in a spacesuit, but we'll find out when we hear them. Quick book, by the way, recommendation. I seem to recommend a lot of books on here, but there's a book I read a couple of years ago called The Psychology of Money. It was a huge bestseller. And it's a superb book and really makes you think about money and budget and what has real value to you. So if anyone wants to go away and think a little bit more about value in money, then yeah, The Psychology of Money, highly recommended. And I can't remember the author's name, but it was a very big bestseller. But we've broken down today's topic into 4 basic areas: flights, hotels, food, and things to do. Flights up first. What are your thoughts on maximizing your value from flights?
Everything kind of depends on your budget when what we're talking about. You know, what might be cheap. It's kind of like, I would say, I'm into watches. So the best analogy I can give is, for a lot of people, a Rolex is like would be a ultimate watch that they would afford. For a really, really wealthy person who's really into watches, their Rolex is their beater watch that they wear to mow the lawn. And they wear way higher end stuff to do other things. Travel's kind of the same way. What I might consider budget travel at this point in my life would probably 20 or 30 years ago seem very expensive to me. So it's interesting. And I remember my dad telling me one time when I was a kid that when you start making more money, you never really have any more money. Your tastes just go up. So you buy a little nicer car, you drink a little bit nicer wine, you stay in a little bit nicer hotels, and it just kind of chunks up like that, and you never really feel like you have any more money. And I've really noticed that's true in my life. So that's kind of the intro to to flights, if that makes sense. So for flights, you know, the days of me jumping on a Spirit airline with basically a little tiny backpack, even though I do pack light, and flying someplace in the middle of the night to save money is probably over. Anymore, I generally fly United or United Partners because I have status with United, and I get in the lounges, and I get upgraded, and I get all kinds of cool little perks. But even that being said, a couple things I would say with flights. One, generally book through the airlines. Don't try to book through weird Johnny's flight company, because if there's a problem, then the airlines won't help you. So even if you have to pay a little more, I think it's worth the money to actually book directly through the airlines.
Yeah, I second that. I've booked a few times through go to kayak.com, and then you end up booking through some company you've never heard of, and been left stranded because it's not their problem, basically.
Yeah, and I saw that happen one time when I was flying. I can't remember where I was flying. Maybe I think it was like to Ireland, and I missed the flight, and a group of us missed the flight, and those of us that had booked through the airline, the flight had, or the airline had people waiting at the gate to help us when we missed the connection. And then there was a few people there that had booked it through Expedia, and it was an absolute nightmare because the airline just refused to help them. And they were trying to get a hold of Expedia in another country in the middle of the night to try to rebook their flight, and the rest of us were just rebooked immediately and handed new tickets. So some things, I think, when it comes to value and looking at things, cheapest is not always the best. Sometimes it's worth spending a little bit more money. And I had a conversation with one of my friends about this today, where I used to always prepay for my hotels, and we'll save that for the hotel one. But flights, book through the airline itself, and then probably the best tip that I can give anybody is, for instance, I live in Denver. If you book, let's say, Denver to Tokyo, it's going to be maybe $2,000. If you book LA to Tokyo, it may be $800 or $900. It might be a little bit more, but let's say it's $900. So what you do is you book a separate flight, Denver to Tokyo or Denver to LA, and then you book your LA to Tokyo flight, and you can end up saving $700 or $800 in literally like 2 minutes work. Now, you have to be careful doing that. You want to, if at all possible, you want to stay on the same airline. So if there's a problem, they'll help you. If you fly Frontier to LA and then you miss your connection, United's not going to care. But if you fly United the whole way, generally they will care. But if for big international flights, I try to fly out the night before anyways and stay at like a LAX hotel. And you could fly from Denver to LAX, stay at an LAX hotel, fly out the next morning to Tokyo, and probably still save $500 or $600. And that's a huge tip. So if I'm looking at international flights, I look from all the big hubs in the U.S., which is basically LA, Denver, Dallas, Chicago, New York, Atlanta, and see what the best deals are, because sometimes it can vary massively. And I've gotten tickets before to like Europe from Chicago for $600 or $700 that were $1,500-$1,600 from Denver, and I just bought a little flight to Chicago and maybe spent the night and had some good food and pizza or something, and then flown out the next day.
Yeah, and in Europe that works even better with the train network. I mean, I travel to Austria a couple of times a year, and sometimes I fly to Munich or Milan or Zurich or Vienna, but as long as you can get within reach, I can just get the train to my destination. So yeah, shop around a little bit on. Just because you live near X airport doesn't mean that every flight you take has to go from X to your destination.
Yeah, and look too, because some budget airlines, they'll fly to some weird old airport way outside of wherever you want to go, and then you're going to spend so much money trying to get to the downtown, especially if you fly late at night and like all the trains are stopped running or the buses have stopped running. You've got an Uber or taxi, some incredible distance. You could end up spending more than if you just bought a ticket to a closer airport in the first place. So you really have to look at all that stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes with experience and knowing the destination. I remember my worst one was I booked a flight because it was good value from some place in China, and we transited through. So I went from wherever this place was to somewhere on the south coast of China, Xiamen or something, and then to Beijing. And I thought, wow, 2 domestic flights. Okay, well, I guess that's how it goes. But it turned out that the place I was in was about 4-hour train ride from Beijing. And if I just looked, I could have just got the train to Beijing. And it ended up being a 38-hour journey, which was a record. Yeah. So yeah, just try and don't just look, I got to go from A to B. Try and look if there's anything a bit closer to A, or can you stop at, like you say, stop on the way, get a hotel. Could you fly to somewhere that's a 2-hour train ride from B and a bit cheaper? So shop around a little bit.
And I had one recently where I was going to North Carolina, and Greensboro Airport's a little bit closer to where I wanted to go than Charlotte, but I flew into Charlotte because it was cheaper, and I was renting a car, and I rented a car while my flight was delayed, and by the time I got to Charlotte, the rental counters had all closed for the day, and I had no way basically to get from Charlotte to the town that I was trying to get to in the middle of the night, and I had to Uber, which cost me like $130 or something to get to this little town because it's an hour drive. When if I had just paid a little bit more and I flown to Greensboro, even if my flight was delayed, it would have been way quicker and easier and cheaper for me to get to where I was going. And I was so annoyed with myself because I didn't follow my own my own philosophy. But as I say, you always learn a lesson on almost every trip you go on. And plan ahead. Plan ahead. If you look at sometimes because I like to go to Vegas. Vegas can be like $200, maybe $350 if it's like a high season, but $200 from Denver. If you look at Vegas last minute, sometimes it's $900 for a flight. So don't try to go the last second. Go, look at it as far out as you can. I book trips out way in advance a lot of times. And I'm not an expert, and I know there's ways that you can get apps and stuff that'll notify you when every price drops. And I'm not that technologically savvy, but I do try to book things way out and don't try to do things last minute.
I agree with that. I remember I've looked up when the flight's cheapest, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
To me, when the flight is at a price you're willing to pay and in the timings are suitably convenient for you, that's probably the time to book your flight. I can't be bothered risking it.
Yeah.
It's like playing them. It's like betting on Bitcoin. I mean, maybe you win sometimes, but maybe you don't. It's just not worth the hassle to me.
Well, and what I learned with especially having kids when I travel with them is, so let's say they have October break, and October break is, let's say, the 10th through the 17th, so it's a week long. What you don't want to do is sit around and go, where should we go for fall break? And someone goes, well, I want to go to Rome, and I want to go to Tokyo, and I want to go to wherever. And then you start looking, and it's an absolute unbelievably expensive trip. What I always do, and I've learned this the hard way, is when is fall break? It's the 10th through 17th. Okay, I'm going to get on Google Flights, or I'm going to get on United, search everywhere, and I'm going to put in from Denver or from wherever I'm looking at for that week. And then I am going to go wherever the best deal is that sounds someplace fun for the family. Because it can be, let's say you're buying 4 tickets and you find a ticket to, I don't know, let's say, and it can vary greatly based on the day, but let's say you go to Barcelona at $700 a ticket. So that's $2,800 for a family of 4, which is still expensive. But let's say you're hell-bent on you want to go to Tokyo, and it's the summer, and it's a high season, or I guess this would be the summer before fall, but let's say, for sake of argument, that it's a high season, and it's $2,000. You're up to $8,000 on flights. So
it's like compound interest when you start buying multiple flights.
It is. So the truth is, kids will pretty much have fun anywhere.
Yeah.
As long as you have fun and you can always find stuff to do, and go someplace where you get some sort of decent deal on flights. Because I talk to people and they're like, yeah, we went to, and it's just some random kind of lame vacation. And I'm like, and they'll just tell me like, yeah, we went there for a week and God, we spent $10,000 or we spent $12,000. And I'm like, $12,000 to go to like London or somewhere? I'm like, it's like, that's insane. Well, yeah, but we really wanted to, or my spouse always wanted to see blah, 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 blah. And it's like, maybe everybody has that amount of money, but I like to travel a lot, and you can't travel a lot if you're dropping crazy amounts on all your flights.
No, 100%. And I mean, I do it with Airbnb. I love the flexible, I just put a week anytime in July and August, and I just zoom in and out on the map, and you just, somewhere pops up and you Google it and you think, well, it's a nice town, sure there's stuff to do, let's go there. And we just drive there and normally have a fun week. So yeah, shop around. So I think the key for flights is basically be flexible. Sometimes it's worth that little bit more to get into the big hub airport. So much of it will depend on the trip length, the purpose of the trip, who you're traveling with. I mean, if you're traveling with kids, your tolerance of potential disaster is probably going to be a lot lower. But it's basically a balance of cost and comfort, and a lot of it comes with experience, just eyeballing it. But I think the key is to be flexible, shop around, see if there's a little compromise you could make, maybe flying to an airport that's further away, or maybe it's worth paying that bit extra to get a bit closer in. And as I say, it all depends on the trip. But
yeah, or you don't mind a red eye.
yeah, I don't like having no sleep, so I try and avoid flights that are clearly going to keep me awake and destroy my body clock. And speaking of sleep, topic 2, hotels. You and I, when we met in North Korea, were clearly in agreement because we'd both booked the single supplement. I do not want to share a room.
Oh God, I hate sharing a room with somebody that's not my, like an absolute partner of mine or my children.
Yeah.
Unless
I'm in a loving relationship with someone, I don't want to sleep in the same room as them.
Oh, it's miserable sharing a bathroom, and I'm in total agreement with that. It's worth the money. And especially you're generally not guaranteed 2 beds at hotels. So, let's say you and I go to Europe and then we show up in the middle of the night and they're like, "Oh, we don't have any rooms with 2 beds." So it's like, I think we'd sleep like feet to face to make it less weird.
I just go on the floor, Japanese style.
Yeah, or one of us is throwing a bunch of well, it'd be Europe probably, so there's no bathtub to put blankets in. But yeah, I am not staying with somebody in. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
But I remember back in the day when I was living in New Zealand and we did some road trips, and we'd just stay in a hostel and you'd stay in a bunk room with 16 people. It didn't seem to matter. I don't know when I got so soft, but anyway, whenever it happened, it's firmly happened now, and I don't want to know.
Well, and I can't remember if I used this example in another podcast, but if I did, I apologize because it's such a good example. But it's like, I think you should go with your age a little bit. This is one of my opinions. I think if you're in your 40s and you're staying at hostels, it's weird.
I agree.
And I think the other people staying there look at you like you're a weirdo. Like, what are you doing staying with all these college students? Don't be a weirdo unless you're like have absolutely no money and the only way that you can travel at all is to do it. Get a hotel like a normal person or get an Airbnb like a normal person, and don't be the creep, walk in the shower when you're 40 years old with a bunch of 19-year-old girls walking around looking at you like, what are you doing? I know a guy who is my age, and I'm almost 50, who told me that he was having trouble finding a 20-foot long cord for his phone. And I said, and I know he won't listen to this, but I said, why do you need a 20-foot cord for your phone? And he said, well, when I'm staying at a hostel in bunk beds, I need a cord so I can have my phone with me so nobody steals it. And I thought, you're almost 50 years old. I know you have a really good job where you make money. You're just a cheapskate. And you're seriously going to be staying in a hostel with a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds who went to Europe because they can buy beer when they can't in the U.S., and you're going to have a cord stretched all the way across the room so nobody steals your phone.
It's just
like,
awful.
why not just get your own room and not have to worry about it? I just thought that's just one of my opinions. I think it's just stupid. Grow up, get a hotel room, so, and I certainly don't want to be wearing, flip-flops and walking off to the shower somewhere or to the bathroom in the middle of the night because I don't have my own bathroom.
Yeah. I'm with you. No, I don't know when this became how I feel, but I'm firmly with you. I mean, even if we do multi-day hiking trips now, these new ultralight hiking tents are so good that if there's 4 of us, we take 4 tents. It's just, no, I don't want to share it. Yeah. And even if you've got to carry it on your back for a week, I've got a tent that weighs a pound. So I just sleep in there. But yeah, I mean, where we probably do differ though is hotel caring about the hotel. So for me, if it's clean, quiet, and the bed's comfy, I'm kind of good. The hotel is not part of the experience for me. But you love hotels, hey?
I think it depends on who I'm with too. And back, I'll just say one other thing. If you're the age where you go to a dance club and everybody looks at you weird, then that's the age that you should no longer be in hostels.
Yeah, that's probably a good gauge. I mean, my skin crawls at how uncomfortable I am thinking about being in a nightclub.
Oh my god, me too. Oh, that's just horrible. That's horrible. So back to hotels. I if I am by myself, I am happy with, like you said, clean, quiet, safe, good location. I can walk everywhere, and ideally a free breakfast. I mean, nothing's really free, but included breakfast. If I am with a partner, I would prefer it to be a little fancier. I think it's a little bit more romantic. And then if I'm with my kids, I care about a pool and free breakfast.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe I thought I kind of had the impression you enjoy the hotel experience.
I do enjoy the hotel experience, and I like being in a nice hotel, but I'm certainly not miserable in a mediocre hotel. I am not at the point in my life where I'm going to stay at a crappy hotel anymore. I learned that lesson the hard way. Probably 10 years ago, when I wasn't quite in the place of my life where I am now of success. I took a trip to Indianapolis just because I'd never been. And I think I took some cheap airline like Spirit or something just for the weekend because I'd never been there, which I wouldn't do now either. And I stayed at a Super 8, which was because it was like the cheapest hotel I could find. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I just had this weird feeling. I turned the light and I looked over and there's a bed bug on my pillow.
Oh no.
Yeah. And it was the worst experience. I basically was up the entire night. There's no way I could go back to sleep with bed bugs. And I went down that morning and was like, I think there's a bed bug in my bed, because I took a picture of it and showed it to him. And the lady had like no emotion, and she just reached underneath the counter and handed me a big plastic bag for all my stuff. So they knew there was like a problem in the hotel, and of course didn't say anything. And I had to put all my stuff in this plastic bag. I felt disgusting. I went home, and when I went home, it was the winter. I stripped naked in my garage, left everything in the garage, and went in and like took a shower, and then left everything out in the cold for like weeks, hoping you'd kill kind of whatever was in
the
there.
bed bugs.
And it was just, and then went through everything like crazy before anything came in. Then I think I washed everything on hot. It was such a nightmare. And after that experience, I thought, you know what? No more.
Yeah.
Like, this is stupid. I'm going to spend a little bit more. And I kind of moved up to better hotels after that. So yeah, that was a terrible experience. And now still, I generally check the room for bed bugs when I go in. You pull up the corner of the sheets and see if there's any kind of trails or any little blood droplets or anything like that. But I check, even at nice hotels, I generally check after that, because it was such an awful experience.
Okay. Well, now I'm going to start checking when I go. But yeah, I mean, I think for some people, the hotel is kind of, people like boutique hotels, or modern hotels, or old style hotels. I'm more, if it's comfy and I can get a good night's sleep, I'm kind of good. The location is not super important to me, but yeah, they can make.
But it depends on where you are too.
They can break a trip,
because and if you're someplace tropical, you don't want to be, a 15-minute drive away from the beach, probably.
Yeah. Location is key.
So it depends. Yeah, location for sure.
And then the other thing I would say is, if you're in North America in summer, then camping is great, and it's not super rough. I've done road trips before where we camp for a couple of nights, have a night in a hotel to break it up, have a nice shower. Yeah. So that can be a great option. In Europe, a bit less so.
Well, and I don't generally look a lot at hotel reviews. I know some people get really into that, but I feel like most people that post reviews are haters and they hate everything. Yeah. So unless it's just obvious, like every single review is terrible, I just really don't worry about it, because you get people and they focus on like the stupidest little things, and they're so miserable. And you have to understand sometimes that you're in other countries and build qualities might be different, or the air conditioners don't work as great, and they don't have all the same amenities. And it's okay if there's not, you know, the same toiletries that you're used to. It's different.
Yeah, I agree with that. I saw a review for a travel company recently, and it was a 2-week trip in New Zealand, and they gave the trip 1 out of 5, and it said our driver was late on the first day, and we had to wait an hour for him, and it was just the most awful start to the trip. Rest of the trip was great. And you think,
That's
you were
so
there
stupid.
14 days, and you're giving it 1 out of 5
Yeah.
because of 1 hour. So
Yeah, yeah. People are so entitled. Yeah. Now, anything else on hotels? And then I'm going to say a controversial statement.
no, go for it.
Or what about? I guess another thing we can talk about real fast is the difference between hotels and Airbnbs. What I know you like Airbnbs. Why don't you talk about that?
I love Airbnbs. Yeah, it gets a hard time, and I know particularly here in BC, it's done some damage to the housing market, and it's changed. It's inflated house prices, and it's changed neighborhoods. And a friend of mine lives on the street, and everyone's got an Airbnb, and now there's nowhere for him to park, and people stay up partying. Yeah. I'm not saying Airbnb is perfect, but it's worked great for me, and I love having my own kitchen and just having my own living room, and just not being confined to a hotel room, and not being forced to eat out every night. Because we're going to talk about food next, but if you can avoid eating in restaurants, the change in the price of your trip can be transformational. So I really like Airbnb. I think you also get to stay, often you get to stay in a basement suite, and you'll meet the people, and that can be fun. Or it's somebody's holiday home, and it feels like somewhere that people love instead of a soulless hotel room. Or it can just be a way of staying somewhere and experiencing, say, a downtown of a city without staying in some incredibly expensive soulless city centre hotel. So I'm a big fan of Airbnb. I know it's caused a lot of problems, but from my perspective, I've got a lot of great trips out of it.
Yeah, I think it can be a little political with some of the neighborhoods. I know in Spain they've had some issues where they're trying to ban.
Well, they've banned it in most of BC, so yeah, it's
really?
very hard to find Airbnbs in most of BC now.
There's some other places that have done some of that. I think New Orleans has done some of that. I can see the benefits of both. And I think it kind of depends for me on what I'm doing. If I was going to go somewhere for a month, which is not something I really do, but if I was going to go someplace for a month, I would want an Airbnb because I can cook my meals. I have a little bit more space. It's cheaper. Even if there's a nice hotel breakfast, after about 3 or 4 days of any hotel breakfast, you get tired of it. I just rather do my own thing. If I have a big family, like when I would travel with both my sons when they were young, when we would go to, like, we did a trip to Romania, and we got this amazing, huge, gigantic Airbnb. In a hotel room, it would have been miserable, or you have to get a couple rooms, which is super expensive. So I think it's great for that. Me on my own, I generally stay in hotels because I have status with Hilton, kind of like my status with United, and I get upgrades, and I get free breakfast, or I get lounges with free alcohol at night, and I get like all these perks for it. So I'm more likely to do that. The other thing that I like if I'm by myself is I like having access to the concierge, so that I can go ask for help for things or advice for things. When you're in Airbnb, you really don't have that option. You pretty much have Google, or you can try to get a hold of the owner of the Airbnb that may or may not speak your language. So I'm not diehard on either one. I think they both work well for different people in different situations.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, Airbnbs, hotels, or camping. I can live with either depending on the circumstances. But we just mentioned food, and this is an area where you can really affect the price of your trip. And that's why if an Airbnb, as you say, particularly if you're staying for a prolonged period, but if the price of an Airbnb is pretty similar to a hotel, it's cheaper to take the Airbnb because you may be able to cook at home or prepare food at home. It makes a huge difference, and especially as you mentioned, traveling with a family, it really racks up when you're buying food in a restaurant every day.
Yeah, it really does. So I've mentioned this before, but I generally eat 2 meals a day when I travel. So I either have free hotel breakfast and then I have dinner. If there's no free hotel breakfast, I will have tea or something in the morning, and then I will usually get something little for lunch and have dinner. But I never ever have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The only time I would ever do that is if I was like on a cruise ship or an all-inclusive or something like that. But generally, I just aren't that hungry that I want to eat 3 meals a day, and it can be unbelievably expensive if you have a family. When you could easily spend, if you have family of 4, you could easily spend $100 on breakfast, $100 on lunch for nothing good, and then a couple $100 for dinner, and you could be up to $500 a day in food for a family of 4. Easy.
I mean,
if you don't plan right.
It's pretty hard to, let alone a decent restaurant. It's pretty hard to walk out of Denny's for less than $100 with 4 people.
Yeah. So if you're staying at like an Airbnb and you've got your family, get milk and cereal for your kids. If you want to, well, now eggs cost $1 billion, but if you want to, make something for breakfast, and then get stuff for sandwiches for lunch for everybody, and then maybe cook a nice dinner or go out to dinner every few days, so you kind of get some of the local flavor of going out to eat. Because it's no fun to go to Italy and make all your own food.
No, you got to find a balance. But as you say, if you can just have some stuff in the fridge in your Airbnb and potentially make a picnic lunch, and you're only going to a restaurant once a day, you could be looking at $100 versus 400, as you say. So I think it's food can be insane weight on your budget, and
they can.
And again, talking about what has value, I don't particularly enjoy the fine dining experience. The formality of the service and pretentiousness isn't the word, but the intricacy of the food doesn't interest me. I can see that it's cool and I can see that it requires some skill, but it doesn't. I don't really care. I just go, oh, that's nice, but I don't get a huge amount out of it.
Yeah.
And when I think about my most memorable meals traveling, I think about the dumpling restaurant we went to in Taipei.
Yes.
I remember I was camping for a week in a place called Aofuad, tiny village in the south of France, and a guy turned up in a van, and he was selling rotisserie chickens, packets of mayonnaise, and warm baguettes. And to this day, it's one of the best dinners I've ever had. Just cracking the baguette open with my hands and filling it with the chicken. I remember one time I was in Monaco, and Monaco, you could probably spend some pretty serious money on dinner if you wanted to, but we went and got pizzas for €10 and sat on Monaco Harbour and swung our legs over the sea and had the pizza. And to me, those are the memorable eating experiences. So often going to that fancy restaurant is not going to provide you with as memorable experiences. Buying a baguette in France and some ham and cheese and going sitting on and watching the sunset. So it's it's figuring out what you value in terms of the eating experience.
It is, and I do like fine dining. And I like nice steakhouses too, which are very expensive. But I am probably not going to take a family of 4 to a 3-star Michelin restaurant in Paris for dinner. It's going to cost you $1,500. But if I'm by myself in Paris, I will very likely go do that dinner at least once when I'm there, and because it's a very French thing to do, and have that experience and do the wine pairing and doing the whole thing. And but if you are interested in fine dining, I don't really like the term foodie, but if you are into fine dining, another great way to do it is go to lunches. So look for Michelin star restaurants. A lot of times they have lunch menus that are considerably cheaper than dinner, and you can have that experience of trying something and you still have the same wait staff and the same building, and a lot of times the same food. It might just be slightly different portions, and then go do something cheaper for dinner, but you can still have that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really a case of figuring out what you value, because as I say, I consider myself a foodie, but I don't. But that means I love trying different food, and I love food. But that doesn't mean it needs to be expensive. It doesn't mean it needs to be intricate. It could be, it could be getting that baguette for a euro just as the shop closes in France and filling it with local cheese and just sitting on a rock and watching the sunset. So I think food is the classic example of figure out what you value and go from there.
Yes. Well, and I like that stuff too. I love getting like some bread or cheese or, to go pizza. Chinese food is always good for that, for something that's reasonably priced, no matter where you are in the world. But I also like to look and see kind of what are the locals doing. If there's some fast food chain that all the locals seem to love, I want to try it. And I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm too pretentious for that. I would never eat a hamburger in wherever, or I would never get, a hero in wherever. If that's kind of a local thing to do, that's what I do. And I'm the same way even with beer. Like, I look at, I know people can get very like prissy with their beer, but I always say when I'm in a country, like, what does a guy that works on the road have like when he gets off work? Or like, what does some roofer drink at his lunch break? Like, that's what I want to try. I don't want to try some bizarre weird beer that none of the locals really drink. I usually Google like, what's the most popular beer wherever, and it's usually some kind of light beer, but if that's what the locals drink, that's what I want to drink. And when we were in Taiwan, we drank, it's called Taiwan beer, which isn't a very good name, but very clever name. But, we went out that night and had like Taiwan beer, and I just think that's just kind of the way to do it.
I agree. Yeah, I remember when we sat on plastic chairs at a plastic table and watched the world go by, and that's the best beer you'll ever have versus some $11 pretentious crap that you found in some hipster sold you in a bar. So
yeah, that some weird beer that neither one of us like, but we pretend to like it because neither one of us wants to admit it's not very good because another person, we're afraid the other person's going to, well, you just don't appreciate this really good beer that's made from angel tears or something.
Well, I always remember Anthony Bourdain, very successful New York chef, hosted a travel program for 20 years, and his favorite restaurant in LA was In-N-Out Burger. Yeah, and he said when he has a burger, he doesn't want cheese, he wants this yellow cheese-like substance.
Yes, and he loved Jollibee, which is a Filipino fast food restaurant. He loved that place.
There's nothing wrong with fast food. I mean, if you go to Whitby on the northeast coast of England, I'm sure you can go to an expensive restaurant, but if you want the Whitby experience, you get fish and chips, and you sit on the seawall, and you eat it out the paper.
Yeah. So, well, remember when I visited you in Canada, remember what I wanted to go for dinner?
Yeah, and you made me eat poutine.
Yes. And what is that for people that don't know?
It's French fries with gravy and cheese. I honestly, I'm going to do my Canadian citizenship this year, so I will be a Canadian by the end of this year. And I'm kind of ashamed that that's the best we can do. But I mean, Britain's not known for its amazing food, but at least fish and chips and a full fry-up is pretty great food, even if it's not the most flavorful. But yeah, poutine, honestly. Whatever. You know what? Fine.
And what's the cocktail they drink? It's kind of like a Bloody Mary.
Oh, I don't know.
And it's got Clamato in it instead.
I don't know. I'm pretty firm beer and red wine drinker, so me and cocktails don't often meet. You're gonna look it up now?
Yeah, I am gonna look it up.
All right, I'll give you a second to do that. But while you do that,
the Caesar. It's called the Caesar.
Oh, I have heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they're actually really good, but it's like a Bloody Mary with Clamato juice in it, and that's like a very Canadian thing.
Oh, so well, I can't stand tomato juice and I can't stand vodka, so it's never really aligned for me.
What about Clamato? it's like tomato with clam juice in it.
Oh God, I can feel the back of my throat's clogging up at the thought of that. Yeah, that's not for me.
But yeah, if you're in Canada, get some poutine and a Caesar.
All right. I'll probably skip the Caesar and I might skip the poutine as well. But yeah. Things to do. The final topic. Saving money on things to do. And I think my advice here is don't just look at the famous stuff. Figure out, again, talking about value over price, what do you actually want? I mean, I think of the big cities I know best, I probably know London the best. You could basically see everything for free. You just walk around and it's right there. And you can spend a ton of money if you want, but just figure out what you want to do. The most famous stuff might not be the most interesting. We talked a couple of weeks ago about Tokyo. You can pay a load of money to go up the Tokyo Tower, or you can just wander around Tokyo for free and enjoy yourself. So I always think when I go to a new city, I don't just look on TripAdvisor and see what the 10 most famous things are. I think, what do I want to do? What have I heard this city's great for? What have people recommended? What do I need to do to experience this place fully? And then I figure out a way to do that in my budget.
Yeah, I actually like this topic, and this is, again, depends on who you're with. Because if I'm by myself, I just generally don't care. So let's say there's a art museum and it's $30 or $35 to get in. If I'm by myself, I don't care. I'm with a big group of, like, big family, and I'm like, I don't really want to spend $150 on this art museum that my kids don't really want to see anyways. So I think it kind of depends on that. I've got two sons. One of my sons is going to culinary school. He's really into food. My other son is very much into history. So I really gear stuff to see and do based on those two things. So, like, my son is into food. We'd probably go to, like, a street market, or we'd, go to, some, like, place with little stalls where they sell different food. And my other son, I would be looking for museums and monuments and things like that. I think it sounds so easy and so simple, but instead of using TripAdvisor, just Google free things to do and blah, 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 and start looking for it. I love just weird things too. Atlas Obscura is really good, the website. You can put stuff in and it'll have stuff like, there's a statue to this TV show that, that's in this weird square that has kind of been forgotten, and I'll go try to find it. Or there's just a strange thing in a store, or a strange thing in a restaurant, and it'll have all this kind of bizarre stuff in it. So I'll look at that. Monuments are really good. They're always free. Parks are really good. They have a lot of them have artwork in it. So you kind of look for that stuff, especially if you have kids, just to get out of the hotel and go look for stuff. Like, let's go look at this monument to this war thing and blah blah, and then it creates a conversation. Well, what was that war? Who is that person? Or why is he dressed that way? Or and kind of makes educational and really doesn't cost anything.
Yeah, I agree. But I really think that life and experiencing a place comes from just walking around. So if you go to Paris and you just go to the Louvre and the Eiffel Tower and the Notre Dame, that's great, and those are amazing buildings and amazing sights. But to me, you'd better just wandering down the street, walk into a cafe, put your phone away, watch people go about their everyday life, try and grasp what life is like for people in Paris. Go to a random bar and order a beer and sit down, and maybe the barman talks to you, maybe they don't. Just people watch. Just take in the place you're in. It's not always about the famous sites. So figure out what you really, really care about doing. And for me, it's about experiencing a place. It's not about ticking off the famous sites.
Another free thing to do that I always find really interesting is cemeteries.
They can be so interesting.
They really can, and some of them are incredibly beautiful and historic. You go to one in Paris or something, and you can spend a lot of time just wandering around these cemeteries for nothing and see all kinds of cool stuff. And it's actually, people think it's weird, like you took your kids to some cemetery, but let's say there's some famous person. You can be like, whoever finds the whatever, whoever this person is gets, I don't know, some candy or whatever it is, and make a game out of it. Or let's just make a game of who can find this first, and you kind of go off in different directions looking for stuff. But it's really cool, and it's also becomes educational because it's like, Jim Morrison from The Doors is buried in Paris because he died in Paris. So you find his grave, and then you have a long conversation about music, and maybe you go back to the room that night and you watch a couple Doors videos with your kids, and they learn something from it, and it can be a really, really cool experience, I think.
I agree. I think that's a really good call. Me and you going around the Hollywood Forever Cemetery was great in LA. So
yes,
I think it feels like that's it for budget. Figure out what you care about, whether it's flights, hotels, food, things to do, and make it work for you, however you go about it. But just don't fall into the trap of thinking you got to book the first flight you find, stay in the nice hotel, do all the famous stuff to do, and eat in expensive restaurants. You can travel pretty well and get what you want out of a trip without spending the earth.
You can, and I would tell you, if anyone ever has any questions, you can always message me on Instagram because I'm always full of free advice on this kind of stuff. And then the last thing I'll say, something controversial, is that there's been some studies done that people who are just strict backpackers and stay in hostels and don't ever go to restaurants and don't spend any money actually do a lot of harm to places, way more harm than they do good. And I know everybody has different budgets, but if you're consistently just flying places and not spending any money in their local economy, you're still using up a lot of their resources, their water, sometimes some of their food, their transportation, and you're not giving anything back to the community. And if you really care about that place, maybe you will drop a little bit of money to help them out a little bit, and go to a restaurant or stay in a place that's not 10 people in a room, and contribute to the economy somewhat.
I think that's a good.
So that's my last controversial statement.
I think that's a good call. I don't think anyone on their deathbed goes, "Oh, I can't." Do you remember when we went to Paris and we spent $30 more than we intended to, and we ate in that restaurant on the side of the road? I wish we hadn't done that. I wish we had that money now. So I agree.
Yeah, nobody ever, and we've talked about this before, this is one of my philosophies in life, people don't regret things they did, they tend to regret things they didn't do. So, get out of your comfort zone, go take a trip someplace. There is all kinds of ways you can save money, and you can do it on about any budget.
Agreed. All right, hey, that was fun. You
fun.
Probably need to get some sleep, though.
I'm okay, but I've got a big trip coming up next week, so we'll find a time to do something else. But I'm excited to talk about that trip, which is a place you lived at some point, which is New Zealand.
Yeah, that'd be fun to debrief.
Yeah, so that'll be super fun.
Yeah, and don't forget, you're cheering for the Crusaders, not the Blues.
Yeah, but I'm at Blue Stadium.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's Crusaders.
Okay.
But we'll speak when you get back. Safe travels.
That sounds great. Okay.